In the May of 2026, amidst heightened Indo-Pacific tensions, one project that stood out at the crossroad of national ambitions and intense debate was the Nicobar Project. Today, joining us is Major General Dhruv Katoch.
India's interests now, if we have to become a developed nation by 2047, it is not possible to do so if we have a continental vision. India, the Andaman and Nicobar group of islands are very strategically, geographically situated. Galathea Bay, that is in the southern Nicobar Island, it's a very important place. I have never put environment and security into two different brackets. To preserve the environment, security is essential. I have always believed that environment and security are not antagonistic to each other. They are part of the same stream, part of the Indian civilizational ethos. You treat the earth as mother. Once Galathea Bay actually comes up as a transshipment hub, it is going to have major impact on India's economic development. Right? This gives India the leverage now to be part of the playing group. Development and ecology will go hand in hand. Both will be preserved. So anybody who is naysayer, they have got ulterior motives. If you don't hold on to those islands, somebody else will. And when that somebody else comes there, they will not be worried about the environment. They will destroy it completely. If we have to become a developed economy by 2047, there is no way we can do it from the continental shelf. We have to look seawards. Our aim is to ensure that the islands remain Indian territory. Our aim is to improve our own trade, to ensure that the sea lanes remain open. I think we have been weak. Right since independence, there was a particular narrative of India which was built, historically and otherwise, which leaned towards a particular leftist.
When I saw that Rahul Gandhi video come up, it sort of touched an emotional chord. But only when I started sort of digging deeper into why this is strategically so relevant and important, then I realized that whatever Rahul Gandhi is saying, although ecologically sounds brilliant, but strategically it sounds really foolish.
We have got to get our economy into about a $30 trillion economy or a $40 trillion economy. Government should be supporting agencies. We need very mature bureaucracies and political leadership. Right? So if Adani's get it or some other agency gets it, that doesn't really matter. India also needs these billionaires. The other countries are so proud of their multi-billionaires, the Elon Musk and all of them. For some reason, India is not proud of ours.
Welcome to the Indic Society podcast, where we explore India's strategic destiny, its civilizational wisdom, and the hard choices that a defining rising power in the 21st century has to make. In the May of 2026, amidst heightened Indo-Pacific tensions, one project that stood out at the crossroad of national ambitions and very sort of intense debate was the Great Nicobar Island Holistic Development Project, which is also called the Nicobar Project. Now, undergoing a lot of political scrutiny, this particular project is under pressure of core initiatives that in fact highlights India's ability to ensure that it can project India's maritime future. Today, we are privileged to unpack it with a voice with a very deep strategic clarity. And joining us is Major General Dhruv Katoch, a third generational Indian Army officer with nearly 4 decades of distinguished service and alumnus of the National Defense Academy. And, he is probably one of the most erudite and articulate voices on India's geopolitics and geostrategic issues. So welcome to you, Major General Dhruv Katoch. It's such a pleasure to have you today.
Thank you, Aditya.
Sir, before we deep dive into the false narratives that we are seeing with regards to this particular project, I'd like for you to give us a bit of an insight into where this project was conceived and why. So a bit of a historical background on what this Great Nicobar Project is all about.
Let me take you back, Aditya, much further back, We go back to the previous century. And when we're looking back, from the 50s onwards, right, the main trading routes were via the Atlantic. Right? We come to the beginning of this century and a change takes place. You see, we have China rising, we have India rising, we have Japan rising, right? And then we have a whole group of ASEAN countries, the Southeast Asian countries with very, very high economies. And then a dynamic shift takes place in the world from the Atlantic. The trade now moves to the Indo-Pacific. Now, the major share of the world trade has actually come on the other axis, right? America, of course, is central to both. When we are looking at the Atlantic, it is America, Europe, and now we are looking at the Indo-Pacific. It is America, Asia, and then from the Pacific Ocean onto the Indian Ocean, and then, of course, onto Europe. This is one. Number two, when we are looking at energy supply lines, with West Asia as the major source of energy and the consumers like China is one of the major consumers, the criticality of certain choke points like Malacca come into play. That is number two. Third, India's interests now, if we have to become a developed nation by 2047, it is not possible to do so if we have a continental vision. We can only become a developed economy with a maritime vision. That means we have to now look seawards, and it must be understood that for thousands of years, actually India was a maritime economy. It was only in the last few centuries that the maritime aspect of India's economy came down, and we became increasingly insular and inward-looking. Now, when we are looking at the Indo-Pacific now, which is the new economic hub, let me say, right? Then the routes pass through the Malacca. It is the Malacca Straits which really joins the Malacca Straits onto the South China Sea and then to the Pacific. Or Pacific, the South China Sea, Malacca Straits, Indian Ocean. Now that is the trade hubs. For India, the Andaman and Nicobar group of islands are very strategically, geographically situated. Now that is the geographical advantage we have. They are located, the group of islands, the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, if we give them a geographical depth, a geographical language, it is about 800 kilometers. There are about 570 islands, rocks, etc. The entire total, 570 of them. 36 of these islands are inhabited, and some of them are the bigger islands. And these islands are in two distinct groups. The Andaman group is towards the north, and the Nicobar group is to the south, so it gets the name Andaman and Nicobar Islands. And the two islands are divided in the 10-degree channel. Now, this assumes great significance because when, a large portion of the world shipping actually goes through the 10-degree channel. But the main channel which goes through Malacca, where the major shipping goes, is on the 6-degree channel. And the 6-degree channel is south of Nicobar. Now, the southernmost tip, as far as India is concerned, is in Nicobar Island, is in the point which it is called Indira Point. And from Indira Point, it is just about 100 plus kilometers onto Indonesia. And the northernmost tip, when you're looking at the Andaman Islands, the northernmost point of Andaman Islands is very near Coco Bay of Myanmar. So we have this Andaman and Nicobar group of islands connecting all the way from Myanmar onto Indonesia. And now they occupy those vital, if once you're stationed here, especially in the southern Nicobar Islands, right? That is where Galathea Bay is and Campbell Bay is. This is the place where actually you can influence or monitor all the seagoing traffic on the 6-degree channel via the Malacca coast. And even if the traffic is going northwards, in between the two islands on the 10-degree channel, again, that can be monitored. It is a huge geographical advantage. So that is the geostrategic significance. But there are three aspects I want to talk about here. One, I want to talk about economy. Now, Galathea Bay, that is in the southern Nicobar Island, it's a very important place because for some reason, it has got a draft of more than 20 meters. That means if you want to have a transshipment hub there, not much of dredging is required. In fact, no dredging is required. The major competitors for India are Colombo and Singapore. And their harbors are less than 20 meters. So you can imagine if we get a harbor which is already 20 meters or more, and you develop those facilities, we have a transshipment hub, a logistics hub, right? And
can I just stop you there, sir? Because there is a lot of questions which are being raised about specifically the Galathea Bay, the leatherback turtles, which is the sort of habitat for them, and as a consequence, the ecological disparity that will be caused as a consequence of this particular commercialization of this island. What would you say to those detractors?
Yes. Now, you see, many people have framed this question or this argument in an either-or scenario. I have never put environment and security into two different brackets. Your environment is secure only if your security is there. And you can only be secure, security-wise, if you preserve the environment. To preserve the environment, security is essential. And if you want your security to be essential, you have to also preserve the environment. These are not two different things. I have always believed that environment and security are not antagonistic to each other. They are part of the same stream. We need both. Now, why are people assuming that what we do at Galathea Bay, which is first, as far as the island is concerned, it's about 1,000 odd square kilometers, right?
That's
Galathea
lovely.
Bay is on the southern portion, right at the southern portion, touching along with Indira Point. That is the geography of it. And then on the east, we have the Campbell Bay, where we have already got an army base, a military base. Now, when this port is developed, all these considerations are being taken into account. We are looking into the turtles. We are looking into the population. We have got the some of the tribal population which are living there.
The Shompe, the
Yeah, we
Shompes.
got the Shompen. Now, on the Shompen, there are just 200 to 300 Shompen. We're not talking about thousands of Shompen, just 200 to 300. Their interests will be preserved. They are not going to be moved out of there. They will remain, and their environment and their habitat is not going to be touched. That is the basic point. Please remember, when the Americans went, when the Europeans went to North America, the Red Indians were there, and they massacred millions of them. Indian philosophy is different. Our civilizational philosophy is totally different. We part of the Indian civilizational ethos, the Bharatiya civilizational ethos, is you treat the earth as mother. It is a civilizational concept. That is why when you look at our rivers, they are not just rivers; they are sacred rivers. The Ganga, the Yamuna, our mountains, they are sacred mountains. That is where the source of water comes from. This respect to the land has always been given. The trees, you see. So when we are looking at environment, we will preserve this environment. So when this development is going to take place there, the Shompen tribe, 200 to 300 of them, or you see, maybe less, maybe more. It's not more than 300 anyway. That's the maximum limit, right? This small group will be preserved. The mangrove forests, they will be preserved. The turtles, the turtle nesting areas, they will be preserved. A small area is being taken out, right around to the bay, and that area is going to be developed. And it will be done very, very scientifically. We know it is a biosphere, right? It is a protected area. And
the UNESCO site.
Every bit of development which takes place there will be in consultation with the tribal groups and in consultation with world standards, right? Now, the point is, if you don't do this, you lose. This is, of course, on the civilizational side, the ecology side. We will preserve this environment. India has been famous for it. We don't destroy. Now, on the economic aspect, once this comes up, it's going to be a tremendous boost for the Indian economy. Once Galathea Bay actually comes up as a transshipment hub, it is going to have major impact on India's economic development, right? And yes, other interests may get, other countries may get impacted. Singapore certainly, because it's a major transshipment hub. We will be in competition with Singapore. We'll be in competition with Colombo. Even the Southeast Asian ports are modernizing. So it is not going to be simply India doing it. They're also developing their ports. So when we develop, it will be done for three things. One, it will be developed for logistics. There will be speed, there will be efficiency and cost. So when we're looking at it, it's going to be cost effective, it's going to be reliable, and it'll be safe. So all those aspects are going to be kept in mind when we develop this port, and the environment is going to be preserved. Now, the last aspect is the geostrategic importance. You see, as the Indo-Pacific gets more and more important, and these choke points are getting increasing relevance, all these choke points here, and there are a lot of choke points there, but Malacca is the main choke point. This gives India the leverage now to be part of the playing group, you see. It is not that you're going to be to carry out choke points. The very fact of your presence there can ensure that these choke points remain open. So India will be now part of the players. We won't be, we'll be sitting on the high table when those policies are put forth, instead of sort of being in the background and being forced to accept the dictates of others. And because India will be on the high table, we will ensure that the ecology is also preserved. You see, so there are multiple benefits as far as this is concerned. HADR missions, because you are there, you can do so many things. So I think for India, it is a vital strategic interest. Not only will we preserve our security interest, we will preserve the environment also, because both of them go hand in hand. You cannot divorce the two. People are assuming that development has to take place at the expense of ecology. I beg to disagree. It can be done the other way around. Development and ecology will go hand in hand. Both will be preserved. So anybody who's a naysayer, they have got ulterior motives. And a very large number of these people are sponsored by hostile countries whose interests may be impacted. There's no need to name country, but if some country is being impacted, it takes very little money to put these certain social groups within India. You pay them some amount, then these movements start. We've had it in many places in South India when our nuclear establishment was was sent
Impacted.
back, right? Our copper plants, etc., etc. I mean, the incidences are tremendous.
So you're basically referencing to the Sterlite plants, the Narmada Valley project.
Now you see that the Narmada Valley project is over. There is no ecological damage,
Hmm.
and it has benefited millions of people. Sterlite copper. When you look at
Hmm.
sterlite copper, India was self-contained. Now we have to import copper, and a large part of these imports are coming from China. So
Hmm.
listen, there are vested interests involved in various things, right? Who are making a presumption that when we develop Galathea Bay, it will be at the cost of the environment. Now, why are they making that assumption? This small little group of these tribes, they're just 200 to 300 of them. The Shompen, they will be looked after. The other
Hmm.
tribes, and there are about 1,000 of other tribes, they're in the Andaman group of
In the
islands.
northern part.
They're in the northern islands. Then we have got, the Nicobaris are also there here, but most of them have already been integrated into the mainstream and they're getting the fruits of development, right? So, tribal wise, I think that it is a very, very weak argument. The turtle wise, it is again a very weak argument that those interests will be looked after. The forest cover, that's a weak argument. That interest will be looked after. And there will always be compensatory forestry. So
The one particular aspect which seems to be sticking out is the conversation around the preservation of the corals. Now, how are we going to gratify the sort of questions being raised? And these are compelling arguments that are being raised about the coral lives. How are we going to be able to preserve them? Are we going to be using the Singapore model? Because they did a similar sort of an initiative where, they went ahead and preserved all of those corals, and then they scientifically ensured that they were rejuvenated and replanted elsewhere. Is that a model that we're going to be looking at, or is it a completely different model?
I'm not sure what model they will look after, but take it from me, the corals are going to be preserved. And as I said, you see, this is in India's interest to preserve them because besides the transshipment harbor, which gives its own benefits, right? There will be, ecotourism will also be there, right? And a very important aspect of ecotourism is your corals. So there is no way in which India is going to actually do anything which will disturb that habitat. If we have to relocate them, they'll be relocated. Otherwise, they will be preserved in situ. This is
Just
also a
deep
very
diving,
important part. Yes.
just deep diving slightly into this particular aspect. There are many who have argued that yes, the military aspect of it, the naval aspect of it is very, very necessary. It's quintessential, especially with the rise of what we've seen with the Strait of Hormuz. It ensures that, India also protects and insulates its interests by having a leverage over over the Chinese, where you also ensure that they do not encroach upon your interests. The salami slicing of factor is also negated, because the Chinese presence is already there in the Coco Bay. They're saying that the military aspect is very important, but the feasibility of the transshipment hub is not really spelled out very clearly by the government. You've already had a hub on the western part of India in Kerala, where you've seen that the economy side of things has not really taken off. Here you have projected that a transshipment hub will be built. It's a 30-year project, and the economic feasibility is not yet spelled out by the government. What would you say to those people? And these are people from ex armed forces that I've spoken to who have given me this sort of an insight.
Oh, you see, the military aspect you very rightly brought out. If you don't hold on to those islands, somebody else will. And when that somebody else comes there, they will not be worried about the environment. They will destroy it completely. The Shompen tribes and all the other tribes, people have no interest in them. It is India which preserves them, right? That is part of our ethos, civilizational ethos. Now, commercial hub. Once this becomes a transshipment hub, it has to compete with the others, right? That if you don't get that efficiencies, then it's not going to work. So you require those three aspects. One, it has to be reliable, right? If once it comes up, it has to be reliable. Okay, it can do it. Number two, it has to be cost effective. That means, can we give the same cost what Singapore and Southeast Asian countries are doing? Can we give the cost? And third, speed. Can you do it in time? Now, if you have a transshipment hub which is going to take a month, then obviously it won't work, right? So when we do this, then it has to be done on all three factors. You take time into cost. It has to be a very quick turnover. Number two, it has to be cost effective. That means when I'm comparing it to a transshipment hub, say Singapore, which is very efficient, right? And third, it has to be reliable. That means under all circumstances, it is there, right? You have these three factors. So India is not, we will have to compete. If anybody thinks that you can just, do it sitting on your backside, it's not going to work. We will compete and we are going to win that competition, right? So those three things will be guaranteed. We require transshipment hubs. We have become a maritime power. And in my opening remarks, I told you, Aditya, that if we have to become a developed economy by 2047, there is no way we can do it from the continental shelf. We have to look seawards. Right. This is just one aspect of that, of a maritime trade. And please see the spin-off benefits, because we'll be so heavily dependent on this particular trade, we will ensure its protection. And that protection will be given to all countries of the region. So when we consider ourselves, as the first responders to a HADR mission, this helps, right? Or if we look at ourselves as a protective base, giving security to the people in the region, again, this becomes important. So under all circumstances, this is a very important thing. Economically, it will work, but we have to make it work. It is not automatic. This much has to be understood. Okay, we have made a transshipment hub, now everything will work. There are other countries also. We will compete with them. And when we compete with them, that is what will make it economically viable.
So you're saying this is predominantly part of India's look east policy,
Yep.
which it came up with decades ago. Now, with this look east policy, how do you see from a geopolitical and a geostrategic perspective, the various components of the ASEAN countries, the Quad? Does this also, look at those partnerships and ensures that, it works in conjunction with all of those partnerships?
You see, firstly, when you're looking at all the ASEAN countries, there were 10, now there are 11. Now, all of them, it'll be beneficial to them. It gives you in this most strategic area now, it gives them, with India being there, it gives them that degree of comfort. Number two, when we're looking at the bigger players like, say, China, right? Now, China's got, they've got the ports from Gwadar, Hambantota, Myanmar. Okay, in a sense, they are that string of pearls which they call it, right? Now, it gives China leverage. The string of pearls gives China leverage. Andamans, the Nicobar Island, Galathea Bay will give India leverage, right? So we counterbalance our leverage and both of us can pull on well together. Relations between countries work well when both of them have equitable leverage. Otherwise, one country will really take over the other. Okay.
So when you talk about leverage as well, would this be in some shape and form a preventive mechanism to prevent maybe another Galwan from happening?
Absolutely.
I mean, okay.
Absolutely. So when I'm looking at leverage, I'm not saying that we are going to stop Chinese supplies or something, right? We are simply saying that China will also understand that a conflict situation with India is not something in the best interests of China, and a cooperative stance will work better for China. Now, in that sense, both India and China will benefit.
So it's almost like a preventive mechanism that India is trying to set up and insulate itself from any sort of Chinese adventurism.
Let us use the word, it's a deterrent.
It's a deterrent.
It's a deterrent,
okay,
right?
that's an interesting...
So we also have a leverage, So a country which operates without leverage has a very difficult time. You are seeing what is happening in the Strait of Hormuz. Now, the Arab countries there, they don't have a leverage. So they are having a problem. America didn't have a leverage. So now they put a blockade. They've got a leverage. With the blockade, Americans have got a leverage. But the Iranians were already there. They had that leverage. So now there is a counter leverage and we may get to a resolution. Otherwise, there is no resolution. If it is only one-sided, you can never have a resolution. This is important when you're looking at the geostrategic aspect of it. I think it's important. That you also spoke of the Quad. Now, you see, the Quad as of now is not a military alliance, right? But it is important, again, as a, the group of 4 countries, when we are looking at them, the thrust of the Quad is to keep the sea lanes free and open, right? And Prime Minister Modi also says inclusive, right? So, I mean, it is not, some people may say it's against China. It's not against China. It is simply pro-India. Let me put it that way. It is pro-Indo-Pacific, right? So we have to preserve our interests. We have to ensure that the sea lanes remain open, right? And if an external power tries to use force, then we have a system, we have a base there, right, which is an unsinkable aircraft carrier, which is geostrategically located in one of the most important areas. And this area has become important because the geostrategic balance of power has shifted from the Atlantic to the Indo-Pacific. That shift is actually what has made this important. If that shift hadn't taken place, the Americans and the Western world would be worried about this. So
Okay.
that the shift has taken place, yes.
So the study of this particular leverage that we spoke about, the significance of these islands, the study came out sometime in 2003, I believe. There was a Malaysian newspaper that came up saying that, how Strait of Malacca could become a choke point if India ever tried to militarize this particular island. Do you think the Chinese were well aware of this? And do you think with the Strait of Hormuz now coming into contention, is that what has sort of propelled and given this project new life?
No, the 2003 study, I won't take too much cognizance of this. We established the military base there in 2001, right?
Hmm.
Our aim was not to close the Malacca Straits. Our aim is to ensure that the islands remain Indian territory, right? Our aim is to improve our own trade, right? To ensure that the sea lanes remain open. So the ANN group of islands, they play a very vital role. But now the importance of choke points has come in. We've seen what's happening in Hormuz. And now you see Malacca is another choke point, right? The Bab el Mandeb on the Red Sea is another choke point. So wherever the choke points are going to come in, we have to ensure not that we control the choke point. We have to ensure that they remain free and open. So India's presence there will be to give support to all countries, uh, including Singapore, including Indonesia, including Malaysia, to see that the Malacca Strait remains open. It is not, no one country should be able to close it. And it should be our joint endeavor, including China, to see that the Malacca, the Malacca route, so to say, the shipping lane, the Malacca lane must remain open. It is to India's interest, right? But if somebody tries
Okay.
to block it, let us say if China tries to block something else, well, then there's a counter leverage. So I think from all countries, we should actually now start putting in our resources to see that the sea lanes of communication remain free and open. And if anybody tries to block it, there is a counter leverage to prevent them from doing so. Like in the case of Iran, the blockade is really the counter leverage. Otherwise, there was no counter leverage.
Now looking at the internal aspect of it, the communication side of things, only 1.82% of the forest area is actually being diverted as a consequence of undertaking this particular project. But yet, the kind of narratives that we've heard that, almost 90 lakh trees are going to be, done away with, they're going to be felled. This is a biodiverse hotspot. Now, and as a consequence, these are trees which are millions of years old and you will not be able to, replant them. So essentially, what you're doing is you're encouraging crony capitalism, where you are now saying only the southern part of the island is going to be taken over and commercialized to a great degree. But slowly, you will find that luxury hotels start springing up all over the place, and it becomes a real estate buyout from the by the private players from the government of India, hampering biodiversity. Now, to detractors like that, where you see other countries usually engage with think tanks, you'll have a Chatham House come up with a study, they will provide their narratives. India doesn't do that. It doesn't sort of engage with the academicians. It doesn't engage with academia to either, have that narrative in place or even dispel or sort of shed any sort of false narratives. Why do you think that is the case, sir?
I think in terms of narrative building, I think we have been weak. I've got no doubts about that because for some reason it hasn't been that, that culture per se of building narratives has not been there. And secondly, as far as India was concerned, right since independence, there was a particular narrative of India which was built historically and otherwise, which leaned towards a particular leftist account. You see, a leftist view of history, an Islamic view of history. It was the history as told by the invaders. It was the history as told by the Britishers, right? And then our left, those forces, they simply overtook it and they maintained it. Now, when you try to reverse something and look at things from the Indian point of view, from a indigenous lens, from the Indian point of view, people are saying that history is being distorted. I would rather say it's really being corrected. I remember, I'm a reasonably senior citizen now. When I was a young boy in school in the late 50s and early 60s, right? I passed out from school in 66.
Don't give away your age
No,
now.
you know, I was there. We were taught Robert Clive was a hero. Lord Bentinck carried out great reforms to save the people of India.
Mm,
Everything the British did was to preserve India. Now,
mm,
I think, the no bigger lie like that can be told, right?
mm,
We were told that even the Islamic invaders came on a civilization mission. Nobody
mm,
comes on a civilizational mission. They came on a looting mission. India was
mm,
rich. They came here. They took the wealth and they went. That's the way it is,
mm,
right?
mm,
For some reason, we lost it.
mm,
We have to not try to say that what do you call it, try to reverse history or something. But the point is, we have to understand why things happened.
mm,
What was really, as the Indian culture and ethos. In that narrative, I think we are still lacking, because if we get onto narrative building, the very question of destroying environment is alien to Indian culture. No, within the Indian ethos, we just don't do that. Other civilizations do it, not the Indian civilization. It has never been done by us. We need to build that narrative, and I think we need to involve in the think tanks and our educational institutions much more deeply into setting these narratives before we even carry out a project. But there will always be counter views, because the counter view, unfortunately, and I say this with great responsibility, is
mhm,
always better funded than the narrative, than our narrative. There are vested interests. They will put in a few $1 million to spread a particular narrative, right? And then it becomes a movement, and then people start accepting it. Till ultimately you find out that, that narrative is not really true. Okay.
mm,
But by that time, a lot of water, as they say, has flown through the Ganges, and we lose out. So we have to be very careful of this, the Western media spreading particular narratives to suit their interests, the Chinese media spreading a particular narrative to suit their interests, their security interests, and
mm,
those thoughts and ideas being picked up by the Indian media or by
mm,
certain NGOs within India with a vested interest. Now, if an NGO is really concerned about it, that's a good thing. Please be concerned. But if an
mm.
NGO is really looking into those things because they are being paid to do it, then I think that
Then
will
there's an ulterior motive.
then that ulterior motive is something which
Mm,
needs to be countered. Otherwise, in a discussion frame, I think let all discussions come up. Let people come up and say, okay, these are the problems here. Because in our system, our development of the Galathea Bay is not going to be done at the cost of the environment. We will
mm.
we will preserve the environment, and we will carry out the development. Both will go hand in hand. And if we have cut a certain amount of trees, rest assured, 10 times that number will be.
So you've been associated with CLAWS, which is the Center of Land and Warfare Studies. What about initiatives that CLAWS themselves have taken to ensure that there is much more research done, which is put out in the public domain with regards to the kind of disinformation campaign that we've seen, either from the political framework in India? I mean, I personally, when I saw that Rahul Gandhi video come up, it sort of touched an emotional chord. But only when I started sort of digging deeper into the studies and to why this is strategically so relevant and important, then I realized that whatever Rahul Gandhi is saying, although ecologically sounds brilliant, but strategically it sounds really foolish. But there are many who wouldn't have actually gone down to take that pain to actually study this particular project in greater sort of length. Why is CLAWS or any other sort of think tank in India, which is there, engaging with the public, within the public sort of domain, not taking initiatives to give out a clear indication as to what these false narratives are all about?
No, you're right. Actually, this is not really the mandate of clause. They deal with other issues. But now this
Okay.
has become a security issue. So I think that the think tanks like clause, CAPS, NMF, India Foundation, and the others, we will start
Hmm.
looking into this now. And I think it has to be much more proactive. That means we don't wait for the problem to come up and then start talking about it. It has to be preemptive. So to that extent, I think even the government has to, sound out the think tanks that this is what we propose to do, right? And we have to get down to narrative building before the other party. So we shouldn't be the ones who are really trying to negate what people like Mr. Rahul Gandhi are saying. We should
Hmm.
set the narrative before the other party sets it. And I think
Hmm.
that will serve the national interest much better. There's a lot of work which has to be done here, which I think is important. But that is, let's see how that goes.
Okay. So I would say the Great Nicobar Project is not a zero-sum choice. between nature and India, like you basically outlined. It is a test of, how mature India is as a superpower, coming out from the backdrop of a civilizational state, now sort of re-emerging, having gone through all the turmoil from the Islamic era to the British era, now it re-emerging and sort of reinventing its history in a new sort of way. Do you think will we be able to develop foresight, safeguards, and balance by actually understanding that we are securing our future, but at the same time, it is imperative that India achieves these statuses, these key milestones. And one of the milestones that I wanted you to sort of highlight is India's ability to become a formal blue water navy. Do you think is this milestone leading in India towards sort of becoming that blue water navy eventually?
I think, today when you're looking at the Indian Ocean, it is the Indian Navy which is the dominant power. Yes, the Americans are there, the Chinese are also coming in. But, I mean, the Indian Ocean is India's ocean. Let's face
Hmm.
it, not because of any other reason. Geography has blessed you, with certain advantages. The east coast and the west coast of India, it abuts deep into the Indian Ocean. And then we have got the Andaman group of islands on one side. I think, the way the Navy has to develop. I have always felt as a military officer that we need to give much greater thrust to the Navy and start looking seawards. Because in my initial remarks, as I said, if we have to become a developed country, we have got to get our economy into about a $30 trillion economy or a $40 trillion economy. It cannot be done through the land; it has to be done through trade. Right? And
Hmm.
if it has to be done through trade, then we have to secure the trade routes. That is why the importance of the Navy. That's why the importance of the maritime thing. It is not something to hit other countries with. It is something to preserve for our own. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, so just going into the economic side of this particular project, roughly 9 to 11 billion is being estimated over the next 30 years, which is going to be invested into this project. Where not only are you going to have a military base there, but you're also going to have a international airstrip. You're going to have a private sort of transshipment terminal, and which will then sort of generate further into creating a township. How much of this particular project is going to be led with public funding versus how much of it is actually going to be privately funded eventually with whoever the contract is going to go for? There is a lot of presumption in social media and the mainstream media that this particular project has been sold off to the Adanis on the back of, any sort of port development project that comes in India over the last 11 years has gone to them. And as a consequence, they are probably the best fit to actually take over. And as a consequence, then the Indian government is going to be blamed for promoting crony capitalism.
No, you see, there will always be counter narratives. But the
Hmm.
point is that this initiative has to be government led. It's a very important initiative, and leave aside the economic aspects. The security, the geostrategic aspects make it an imperative for India. The economic aspects are going to be a spin off, right? It'll actually make it something which is going to be a very profitable trade. So for India, this is going to have tremendous economic spin-offs if we do it right, right? That
Okay.
means those three aspects I told you, it has to be a very efficient system, right? A very efficient system, timely and reliable. You make it efficient, timely, and reliable, and cost effective. You will find that it becomes the most important transshipment hub in that part of the world, in this part of the world. So, can the government do it on its own? It should not be government led. Any project, if it is going to be done under government agencies, will fail. So, it has to be private led, right? We've seen the example of Air India. Air India was an international airline of world stature. The government took it over. We nearly collapsed it. It's gone back now, right?
Hmm.
It's gone back now to private hands after trying all those experiments with governments do not do business, right? The business must be left to businessmen. Government should be supporting agencies. We need very mature bureaucracies and political leadership, right? So if Adani's get it or some other agency gets it, that doesn't really matter. India also needs these billionaires. The other countries are so proud of their multi-billionaires, the Elon Musk and all of them.
Hmm.
For some
Hmm.
reason, India is not proud of ours,
Hmm.
right? The business community in India is the ones which give jobs to millions of Indians. And yet, when a person rises and becomes financially a powerhouse on his own, we start pointing fingers at that particular person. We want him out. China doesn't do that. Japan doesn't
Hmm.
do that. The US and Europe doesn't do that. They respect the billionaires. Those people, so we've also got to change our attitude towards money. right, or towards wealth. Let me put it that way,
Yes.
and support the creation of wealth. Right. It is
You
only
you
with the
spoke
creation of
about
wealth that you can carry out development. If you don't have wealthy people, then we are nowhere in the world stage, and we will always be dictated to. We will be sitting on the floor getting the crumbs. But now we are in a position to actually sit at the high table and look into what policies are being made and be a part of the decision making process. That is why it's important.
you spoke about cultural conditioning. This is probably one of those cultural conditioning aspects that a lot of us live in India with, where people with money are looked at with some sort of disdain and contempt, almost as if they are criminals. Whereas in the West, the Americans typically patronize their businesses, patronize their billionaires. Whenever they're traveling anywhere, they carry them as entourage to sort of deal with the other foreign economies as well. So that is something which India's, for some reason, has always frowned on. Maybe it's the cultural aspect of it. Maybe it's the political nature of how we look at business, coming from a very
Yes.
socialistic kind of a construct. Right. So thank you so much, sir,
Thank you.
for doing this with me, and helping us dismantle the false narratives around this particular project. Now, your insight of course brings in so much of strategic depth and balance to this particular conversation, and hopefully we will be able to dismantle any sort of false narratives that come up as a spin-off as well. So thank you for cutting through all the noise, and thank you for providing us a clear and conversation based on clarity and conviction. Thank you so
Thank you,
much, sir.
Aditya. All the best.